Hey everyone. At this point you can see that we started to really push the blending of the cell phone a little bit further. But looking at our overall composition, I think it's coming along. One thing that I'm noticing though is that there's mostly larger shapes here. So I think what we want to start to do is to add some smaller shapes into the mix. And just, try to add some more variation, just like I was saying earlier on, to the size of the shapes. We want it to appear random and more of a free-flowing type of thing. So I'm just gonna, be working a little bit quicker, but you guys kind of know the idea now, so we can move a little bit faster. All right, so just going through the same process, making new layers, making a clipping mask. I'm gonna call it pass 1. Get my white brush and set it to overlay. All right, and doing the same thing, adding some highlights here and there, and then placing both of these layers into a folder. All right, and sometimes you need to zoom out and zoom in, and just, when you're working kind of quicker especially, it's nice just to be able to see how things are looking from close and from further away. All right, so I'm just gonna transform this a little bit, make it even smaller. And, see how that's looking. This little piece here kind of floating off out into space. All right, I know this edge is a little bit sharp, so maybe we'll see what it looks like if we mask it out. All right, so add a layer mask. And see what happens when you brush this out. All right. It's just kind of nice when you can, hide the edges or reveal the edges, and it just makes your image more complex and adds that much more depth to it, which is really one of the strongest and most compelling things about Photoshop, I think. So, don't be afraid to just play around and try some different stuff, some weird stuff that you might not usually do. I think one of the mistakes that I made when I first really got into Photoshop and designing was that I was kind of afraid to play around. Like I was, too careful kind of with what I was trying to achieve, and it did kind of limit what I was able to do, because I wasn't feeling as free as I do now when creating stuff. So I think that's an important lesson for anybody, and to not get married to any one particular idea. All right, so don't be afraid to, if something doesn't work, just get rid of it. You don't have to make certain things work. You don't want to force it. All right, so continuing along, same idea. All right, and I think this will be our 10th shape. All right, and you can see how quickly these really start to build up. I mean, you feel like after a while you kind of get in the rhythm, which is nice because then you can really get into more the construction of your image rather than focusing on the individual pieces. But it's good to think about the big picture, while you're working. I think I also want to add some more of these white rings that we created earlier. Add a few more of those, maybe some smaller shapes, and I think that'll definitely help to create that, random arbitrary kind of feel that I'm going for. All right, so again, I want to make this a smaller shape, so I just press Command or Control if you're on a PC, plus the T key on your keyboard, and then hold down the Shift key and drag from any one of these 4 corners to constrain the proportions. All right, let's go in. Maybe mask some of this out, and now that we have the cell phone in there too, it can really dictate the some of the moves that we're making here, and the placement and everything else of these shapes is entirely up to you. You just have to see what works best, right? And just rotating it. Now, one other interesting thing to notice here is that as I'm rotating this, you guys can see it's just kind of going from the center point. And that's because if you zoom in, you can kind of see these these crosshairs in here. Now, let me just hit OK. I'm going to apply that. If I hit free transform again, and I move this little crosshair to, say, the upper right-hand corner, now when I try to rotate it, it's going to be rotating around that axis. So that's just something worth, taking note of and paying attention to, because sometimes you kind of want objects to fan out rather than just, having to manually do that with everything. So just a nice little tip there. All right, but you'll see by default, the next time I go to do it, it'll go back to the center. So you do have to adjust accordingly. Okay. Now, if you'll remember earlier, the way that we created some of our rings was just to make these loose ellipse kind of shapes. And rather than filling them completely, we just went ahead and used the stroke. But before you can do that, you're going to have to change your brush, because right now we have a 600 pixel large soft brush set to 20%. So just hit 0 on your keyboard to bring the opacity back up to 100, and then hold down the Shift key and hit the right bracket on your keyboard. All right, and that'll just modify the hardness of the brush. We're also going to then hit the left bracket key just by itself, no Shift key, to reduce the actual size of the brush. So you can see up here I'm using something about 10 pixels. All right, go ahead and hold down the Control key, click on your path, and select Stroke Path. Simulate pressure you can leave unchecked, and there you go. So now we have another ring that we can manipulate and transform, and just kind of see where we want it to go. All right, and if you want it to be a little bit thicker, you can always duplicate the layer a couple times. Maybe just press Command or Control plus J 2 or 3 times, and that'll add a little bit more thickness to it. Another way you could do that is by double-clicking on your layer to bring up the Layer Style dialog box. And what you can do is, there is a way where you can add a stroke. Here it is. I think they moved it. It used to be on the bottom in the previous version of Photoshop. All right, so just move that aside. And right now you can see it's set to black, so we don't really want that. We just want it to be the same color. So just a white stroke, maybe, you can see how quickly it does affect that. So I'm going to leave it maybe around 3, and hit OK. All right. Just want it to be even smaller. I'm just going to transform it again. Maybe move it somewhere off to the side here. Now you can also, play around with the opacity of this a little bit if you don't want it to be so strong and, command as much attention. And it will kind of give the illusion like it's behind some of these other bubbles that we created earlier. All right, just like we did down here. All right, so you're gonna push it a little further and into space by lowering the opacity. All right. And again, just play around and see where you think this shape will fit best within your composition. And maybe the opacity doesn't need to be quite so low, just somewhere in the middle. All right. And I know I probably, change it back and forth quite a few times, but that's just all part of the process. It's the journey. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into a layer folder. I believe this is our 3rd ring here, so just call it ring 3. Give it an appropriate name. All right, and then moving along, we're just going to continue to add some smaller shapes here. Right, and you'll see now, I'm working a little bit faster with the pen tool and just, trying to keep things kind of loose as I go, so it just feels more organic that way. All right, make selection, press the X key to switch from white back to orange, and then Alt plus Option, or the Alt Option key plus Delete, rather, to fill that shape. All right, this one's going to be shape 11. Add another layer here, just call it Pass 1, and then hold down the Alt Option key and go ahead and click when that little arrow icon appears to have your clipping mask. So now when I switch back to the brush tool, I'm going to have to readjust it to get it back where it was. So we were working with a fairly large soft brush with an opacity of 20%. And again, to get that soft brush back, hold down the Shift key, and this time hit the left bracket on your keyboard. So going left will make it softer, going right will make it harder. And then I'm just going to switch the blending mode back to overlay, switch my color, my foreground color, back to white by pressing the X key, and repeat. So just adding in some highlights here and there, right? Seeing what works. And I feel like maybe I want to take some of these highlights off of the top, so you can add a layer mask to your highlights and remove some of them if you feel like you've gone a little too far. Because I want the majority of the highlights to be here, I think, on this shape. All right, and then I'm going to select both layers and throw it in a folder called Shape 11. And let's zoom out a little bit and see where this shape can go, see where it fits in. All right, maybe we lower the opacity just to see what's happening here. And I think a big part of working on a piece like this is just the interaction of all of these shapes with one another. That's really what it's all about. It's the interaction and getting these unexpected kind of results sometimes. All right, so I'm going to put a layer mask on the actual shape layer. Maybe brush some of that out just like we did before. Nothing new on that step. So all right, you just want to see what feels good. All right, so I think that's pretty good. And you can see here I'm just kind of laying it slightly over the ring to see if that does anything for us, or if the ring is better off kind of floating on its own. But as we continue to add some smaller shapes to this, or let's see what this looks like when it gets smaller. If we don't like it, we can always go back. So I actually do like this shape. I think a little bit smaller, kind of floating on the side, and you can see it's just starting to feel a little bit more balanced as I go and lay some of these shapes over the phone here. You don't want to cover it completely, but just getting that balance and getting it to feel nice is what it's all about. All right, something like that. Yeah, gonna move it back down here, and there you go, something like that. Just continuing along, and sometimes you can, if you want to, you can repurpose some of the shapes that you've previously created. Just copy the folder, and you'll have a copy of the shape and the highlight. So that way, if you get tired of creating all these different shapes and you feel that you have enough variation as it is, then you can do that and maybe just warp it a little or transform it to make it different. So maybe we'll try that next. Gonna add maybe one more shape here. Go ahead and repeat the same process. Shape 12, clipping mask, and add some highlights. Don't forget to switch your colors back to white there, which I almost did not do. Okay, shape 12. And yeah, once you guys get in the rhythm a little bit more, it is easier to work faster, and that'll help move things along certainly. All right, so let's see again. I think it's a little too ovalish. All right, maybe something like that. And now you'll see we have like a few small shapes, a few medium-sized shapes, and a couple of large shapes. So we're starting to get that variation that I was talking about before. And just brushing some of this out to give the illusion that there's shadows being cast from some of these larger shapes onto the smaller ones. All right, so that'll help give us some more depth as well. All right, so that's looking pretty good. All right, so now just as I was mentioning before, you can kind of go through and pick out a shape or two that you like. Let's choose shape 2. Okay, so I'm going to grab this whole folder, drag it down to the new layer icon, and that will make a copy of the entire folder. So that includes our highlights as well as our shape. Okay, so now what we can do is that we have a copy of this. What we can do is move it around and play with that a little bit more. So it's exactly the same shape that we had earlier, but it just saves you a little bit of time when you're working faster and you don't want to continue to just create shapes that are feeling a little similar, So it's just a nice quick way to repurpose some of the shapes that we've already made. All right, so that's kind of a cool interaction that we have happening here with these overlapping shapes. All right, and it's also probably because it's lower, it's underneath the shape that we made before, which I think was shape 12 or shape 11. Yeah, shape 11. So one good thing to mention here, once I start to build up a lot of these, sometimes you can lose track of what shape is that, what shape is this, when you're looking for something. So at any point when you're working, say I have the brush tool selected or any tool, let's just hit M so you have the marquee tool. At any point, if you want to switch to your move tool or the main cursor here, you can either hit V on your keyboard, and that'll just change the tool. So that's a quick shortcut. Or if you have another tool selected, you can just hold down the command key on your keyboard, and that will quickly just toggle it. So as soon as you let go, you're right back to whatever tool you had selected before. All right, so say I have the marquee tool. Oh wait, I actually meant to move this, so I'm just going to hold down the command key and drag it over. All right, so something else you can do is if you have the if you have your move tool selected, hold down Control and click on a shape, and it'll tell you right where it is. It'll give you this list of all of the shapes, but most of the time, it'll go right to the shape that you're on. So that's kind of a nice way to quickly get to certain shapes when you're working on a design that has a lot of layers like this. All right, so again, I'm going to copy my shape 10 folder, rename it, maybe shape 14, and move this one around and see where it can go. All right, I'm going to transform it a little bit so it's not exactly the same. Just now kind of filling in some of the space, some of the negative space. And negative space I feel is your friend, so a lot of times it's good to have in there. Some people fill up their images completely, so there's almost no negative space in it. And I feel that sometimes the negative space can work just as well for you as the other space that you're working with. So just continuing to try to get a more balanced feel here. Working with the layer mask on this shape, I'm almost completely brushing that out right there, just to see what kind of effect or illusion it gives you. It's kind of nice. You can kind of tuck it away underneath this other shape here, or not. You may decide you don't like that, and you want to move it more off to the side over here so it kind of spans out on its own. So don't be afraid to do that, sometimes too, because the majority of these shapes will be in the middle, but it's also good to have a few kind of floating away and spreading out, if you will. So just something good to keep in mind. I'm actually going to go ahead and just duplicate ring 3 real quick so I can add another ring without having to go through each step individually. But I will raise the opacity of this shape up from 10% to say maybe 50. All right. I'm just going to move that around and see where that can go. All right, maybe this one we'll rotate it a little bit and just kind of have it floating off in the bottom corner, So I'll try the opacity of, let's see what looks good here. About 60% I think works. Okay, and make it a little smaller if you want. I wouldn't make it too much bigger though, or else it'll just be fuzzy and distorted, but there you go. I mean, it's really starting to come together now, and we've made some pretty good progress on this. So in the next lesson, we're just going to continue to add a few more of these things kind of coming off to the side and in the corners to really drive home the believability and help sell it a little bit more. All right, so this is a good place to save your work if you haven't done so. and I will see you guys in a few.